L'chaim. Today is Zayin Cheshvan, and the idea of Zayin Cheshvan obviously is the Yidden would wait to do the complete changeover of rain before, or they'd wait until the Yidden got back from the Beis Hamikdash, from the temple during the Shalosh Regalim, or during Sukkot, specifically, and then they would do on Zayin Cheshvan the general complete change over the Southern Shemini Atzeres. They would change over to today. They would change over today, and the reason for that obviously was that the Yidden who were walking back, they didn't want them to get caught in the heavy rains. And obviously there's many messages associated with Zayin Cheshvan. Obviously in this case, the main message is of Avos Yisrael, that they, even though people do need rain, still for the sake of those Yidden who won't make it back in time, they had love for their fellows. It's not just based upon the immediate needs, but rather on the collective, everyone who not to cause any discomfort to people, they would wait a bit longer to give them time. So one of the many messages of Zayin Cheshvan is increasing Avos Yisrael. It may be uncomfortable for you specifically, but if you're able to help someone else a tiny bit more, momentarily, not long term, but momentarily, at least try and focus on that. L'chaim. Okay, so classic question which I asked in the message was generally when you leave home, when you go on a journey, what's the general order that you start with?
You leave your house, you go to the airport.
Okay, you leave your house, go to the airport, or if you're doing a road trip, you'll leave Sydney or whichever city you're in, and eventually if you want to really get going, you will leave the country. So generally that's the order. You leave your home, you leave your home, you leave the house, you leave the home, city, country. In this week's parasha, we had the exact opposite. When Avraham is about to begin his journey to Eretz Yisrael, because there's a famine in the land of Canaan, Hashem tells him completely different. He says, Ma'artzecha, leave your land, leave the house of your father, and then leave your birthplace. Sorry, other way around. Leave your land, leave your land, leave the place of your birth, i.e. where you're born, and your father's home, which is the city, which is the home. The exact opposite. Land, city, house. Versus when you normally go on a journey, you go the other way. City, house, city, land. So what's going on? What specifically, what type of journey is Hashem telling Avraham to do? That he would reverse the order. So before we answer that question, there's another question we have to ask, and that is, Avraham is now 75 years old. What's just happened in the past 75 years? Yes, Medrash tells us everything that's happened, but in the Torah, in the 5 books, in the last week's parasha, we know vaguely he's born. He was a baby, and then all of a sudden we're told that Avram and Sarai leave to Ur Kasdim, and then all of a sudden now we're told, leave Canaan and go, leave Eretz Yisrael and go to the land of Canaan.
He's obviously understanding the concept of what the visions that he saw and the epiphanies in that time.
Okay, so why not tell us about that? Why tell us at the very first major mention of Aram, where we actually seem to suddenly catch up with him?
The Torah always does that, though. I mean, look at Moshe Rabbeinu. The minute he left Egypt, he was out for 70 years? 40 years. Yep. It doesn't mention anything. There's a gap there. It's a known concept in the Torah.
Okay, one answer, yes, it's a known concept. But of every known concept where there's missing information, there's a reason for it. So the question is, what's the reason? Why does the Torah only find it necessary to start telling us the story from this point on? Yes, you're right. There's a known concept that the Torah will only focus on what we need to know. The Torah is not a storybook. It's not going to fill in all the missing blanks. It'll tell us what we need to know based upon the messages and the lessons we need. So the question is, what is the lesson that we can learn from the fact that the Torah only focuses on Avram leaving Canaan to Eretz Yisrael? Sorry, Canaan and Israel is the same thing. Leaving Canaan to Egypt, or in general, just leaving the country. God does actually tell him where he's going. He just says, "Go to the land I'll show you." Why now does it pick up on it? And it's to a degree exactly what you just said. Up until now, the past 75 years, Avraham has gone through 3 major stages of recognizing God. The first stage is when he's 3 years old, by cause and effect, he realizes there has to be something greater than what he sees around him, than the pagan worship and the idol worship. There's something greater out there, but he doesn't yet fully understand it. At the age of 48, he obviously begins to understand through intellectual capability that there's something greater, not just by cause and effect, but he actually begins to fully understand. He comes to a conscious recognition that there is a God. And at the age of 75 is when God turns around to him and says, now you're ready. It's the first time that God actually turns around to Avram and says, now you're ready. Why? Because at this stage, Avram has made that jump to full intellectual maturity.
You can use that with Mitzrayim as well. Why did he wait for them to go through this whole period before giving them? Why couldn't he have given it there to wait for this maturity? It's like, when you're accepting the knowledge of God or the Torah, you need to be on a certain level.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
correct.
It's proven in the Torah several times.
Correct. And therefore?
No, it's just saying there's a waiting period if you want to.
Yeah, until a person comes to intellectual maturity. 100%. I'm not. That is the theme in general. The Torah will only focus on an individual when they're at the stage of that intellectual capacity, of to understand, so to speak, Torah mitzvahs and understand godliness. 100%. However, I don't know about however per se, but there is another way to look at these three stages of Martzecha, each one of these three titles, so to speak, fit in or generalize the impressions and the effects that each child goes through in their life, in how they're nurtured. If you start with the very first one, a child is born, they already have a certain character traits, capabilities, and not necessarily how they've been nurtured, but by nature they are born with certain abilities. Some kids will become intellectual, some kids will be more constructive with their hands, other kids will like reading. Every child is born, every individual is born with a particular natural trait. Then they have the impressions of their environment. As they grow up, they'll have the impressions, there'll be their friendships, their parents, society will develop a particular impression on those individuals that they'll grow up to be. Perhaps they won't focus so much on their talents, or they might focus very much on their talents.
Cause and effect.
Which is the second stage. Finally, we have Omi Beis Avicha, which is coming to the point of your own intellectual identity, where you've gone through your whole life. You've gone through a good portion of your life.
Called midlife crisis.
I think that's probably after Beis Avicha, so after you've had your intellectual abilities. But Mi Beis Avicha, the reason why it's called, effectively Chassidus calls it Chochmah, where you come to the intellectual comprehension of who you are. Why is it called Mi Beis Avicha? Because in Chassidus, Chochmah is called the of. Being is called the aim, of the aim. So when you come to intellectual understanding, that's called Mi Beis Avicha. So generally, all the contributing factors to adulthood fit into one of these three categories: nurtured, impressioned, intellectual arrival or intellectual identity. And we all go through those journeys in life. Sometimes it might happen a bit later for some people, others it might happen a bit early. But you generally will go through those three stages in different ways. So Avram had to gone